We've now arrived at the fifth pivotal book in the original Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And now major changes are on the horizon for Harry and Ron and Hermione as the eventual final battle with Lord Voldemort, the darkest wizard of all time, approaches, and Professor Dumbledore is working feverishly to prepare Harry for that battle. As discussed previously, there was this prophecy uttered by Professor Trelawney before Harry was ever born that a wizard child would soon be born who would have the power to defeat the Dark Lord, and would in fact be the chosen one who would ultimately be able to defeat Lord Voldemort. And we know beyond any shadow of doubt, as a matter of fact we've known for some time now, that that boy is Harry Potter. So the Half-Blood Prince opens with chaos in the wizarding world and in the Muggle world. The wizard community, the forces of good, are in open warfare with Lord Voldemort, who is attempting to take over the wizarding world, as he got very close to doing in the past, and turn the whole wizarding world into an extremely dark force full of evil and hopelessness. It's open warfare now. Voldemort has returned. He's at large. He's doing all kinds of damage. People are disappearing. All kinds of horrible things are happening as the 6th year at Hogwarts approaches for Harry and Ron and Hermione. Now, following the revelation that Lord Voldemort had returned, Lucius Malfoy was implicated as being a Death Eater, one of Lord Voldemort's supporters, and sent to Azkaban, the wizard prison. Draco Malfoy, Lucius Malfoy's son, has been recruited and is now effectively joined the Death Eaters, and he's been assigned a mission to carry out a terrible task for Lord Voldemort. His mother is scared to death by this prospect. She's afraid that Draco's going to fail and that Lord Voldemort is going to kill him. So she enlists the aid of Professor Snape, who seems to be functioning as a double agent. It's been hard to tell up to this point whether Snape is a good guy or a bad guy, but he's definitely talking to some really bad folks here. Malfoy's wife has approached him to ask for his protection of Draco as Draco pursues this mission, this horrible mission that he's been given by Lord Voldemort. Draco's mother is able to convince Lord Voldemort to make the unbreakable vow that he will protect Draco in his effort. And the unbreakable vow is a vow that if you break it, you die. And that's going to play a big role later on. So now Professor Snape is supposedly protecting Malfoy, and he's risking his life by making this unbreakable vow. Meanwhile, Albus Dumbledore has started to suspect what's really going on with Lord Voldemort. Voldemort was always evil. You don't see any redeeming qualities, or at least I don't, in Voldemort from the time he was a young child. He's always had this evil nature. But in the process of time, his appearance has begun to degenerate in a very bizarre way. So that by the time he returns at the end of the Goblet of Fire, you see this horrifying monster, that his appearance is very much in sync with the kind of person that he is. So Dumbledore begins this quest to delve into the background of Lord Voldemort in an effort to help Harry be armed for the final confrontation. And he suspects what's going on, but he needs to prove it so that he and Harry can start down the right road toward defeating Lord Voldemort by discovering what his weaknesses are. He recruits a former colleague, Professor Horace Slughorn, who used to teach at Hogwarts many years ago and was in fact one of Draco Malfoy's teachers. It seems that Malfoy had approached Slughorn asking about a particular kind of magic, and Slughorn gave him an answer, and Malfoy was able to use that information to become what he eventually was, the powerful Dark Lord. And Dumbledore suspects what's going on, but he isn't really sure, and he doesn't want Harry to go tearing off down a bad road. He wants to know what's really going on. So he manages to recruit Slughorn to come back and teach at Hogwarts, and arranges for Slughorn and Harry to get to know each other so Harry can find out the truth about Lord Voldemort. What exactly is going on with Lord Voldemort. And as they dig into Voldemort's past, they determine that he is a half-blood. He's a product of a marriage between a wizard woman who was thought to be a squib without any wizard powers by her family, and she was she was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, but the family had really fallen into hard times. They were in poverty, they lived in a filthy house, and they just didn't live in a very good situation. They were like the lowest of the low of the wizarding community. But Voldemort's mother fell in love with a muggle named Tom Riddle, and they were married. But after she became pregnant, her husband, Tom Riddle, deserted her. And so she was very ill during the pregnancy and died, and Tom Riddle, the one who became Lord Voldemort, grew up as an orphan. And he was discovered by the people at Hogwarts. They have a way of doing that, of being a wizard. They can tell when magic's going on. They can tell when a new wizard's been born. And Dumbledore was sent to fetch Tom Riddle back to Hogwarts, and he does so. And Tom Riddle goes to Hogwarts, and he's a pretty good student. He's not a very nice guy. He is in some respects inscrutable. He seems to have this group of followers around him, and he becomes obsessed with the idea of immortality. And he comes across something, that piece of dark magic called the Horcrux, while reading in the library, but he can't get any details. But he is able to figure out that it may be a path to immortality. So he goes and questions Professor Slughorn about this, and Slughorn is very reluctant in a way. He says, you know, this is very dark magic. This is all hypothetical, right? And Draco says, yes, you know, he's just curious. He wants to know. Slughorn says, well, that's a natural curiosity. And so he tells him. Draco asks, what is a Horcrux? And Slughorn explains that a Horcrux is an object in which a person conceals part of their soul. It's a ticket to immortality, because if the body is killed, the person still survives, because the part of the soul that has been hidden in the object remains earthbound, and so the person achieves immortality. But he tells Malfoy that tells Tom Riddle that that's a horrible way to exist, and that death is actually preferable, and it's very dark magic, and it may be a ticket to immortality in a way, but it's not a direction that any responsible, normal person would want to go. But Tom Riddle is obsessed with immortality, and he does discover somehow or another the spell that is required to hide part of his soul in a Horcrux. And the way you split your soul is to commit murder, because murder tears the soul. And then once you've committed that murder, you use the spell to hide the torn part of your soul in an object. But Riddle asks Slughorn, you know, why would somebody only do one? Why would they only want one backup plan? Isn't 7 the most powerful magical number? And Slughorn said, you know, good Lord, why would you want to commit that many murders? Because to split your soul, you have to commit a murder. And 1 is bad enough. He's never heard of anybody attempting to do more than 1. But Riddle does, in fact, so it appears, want to do more than 1. So he has the knowledge. He knows how to do this. And it's become real obvious over the years that his physical appearance is degenerating, and he's becoming more evil, and he's becoming less human. And Dumbledore and Harry were able to determine that, yes, Tom Riddle, who calls himself Lord Voldemort, has in fact split his soul at least 6 times. So now there are 6 pieces of Riddle's soul hidden in various objects, and nobody knows for sure where all of the objects are. It turns out one of them was the diary that was used to lure Ginny Weasley into the Chamber of Secrets in Book 2. And Dumbledore figured that out because of all the bizarre things that were happening in regard to that diary. So it's determined that, you know, in order to defeat and to kill Lord Voldemort, somebody's going to have to track down all these Horcruxes, and then they're going to have to destroy them, and then they're finally going to have to kill Lord Voldemort in his actual body, this horrible monster body that he lives in, to finalize the process and to get rid of Voldemort. And Harry is obviously the chosen one. There's no doubt about that at this time. So during all this, a lot of sort of routine things go on at Hogwarts. Harry starts falling for Ginny Weasley. He becomes the captain of the Quidditch team. Hermione gets mad at Ron, doesn't speak to him for a while, and there are some mysterious incidents in which a player on the Quidditch team is poisoned by taking a package, an object, to Dumbledore. I was told to do that, but opened the package on the way and touched it and was hexed, suffered terrible pain, and became incapacitated and had to be taken to the hospital, and that's investigated. And then later on, somebody, Romilda Vane, this girl who's interested in Harry, tries to slip him a love potion, but Ron gets a hold of it instead. And, you know, so he's all befuddled with this love potion. Harry takes him to Slughorn to try to get cured, because Slughorn is the potions master. And, you know, Harry's doing very well in potions because he's gotten a hold of this old textbook that was supposedly owned by someone called the Half-Blood Prince. And the Half-Blood Prince was just fantastic at potions. And we're going to learn who the Half-Blood Prince was a little bit later on. But he's doing very well. But he takes Ron to get fixed by Professor Slughorn. It happens to be Ron's birthday, so after he takes the potion and gets fixed, they decide to celebrate. And so Slughorn serves him some wine that he was going to give to Dumbledore, and Ron ends up on the floor poisoned. Well, Harry is able to save him by forcing something called a bezoar down his throat, but it's obvious that somebody is after somebody at Hogwarts. Somebody wants to kill somebody there. Well, Dumbledore is able to discover where he thinks one of the Horcruxes are, in a very remote location on the coast in a cave that's very inaccessible. Muggles couldn't hardly get to it. And so he decides to take Harry with him, and they're going to locate and destroy this first Horcrux. And it's in a cave on the coast, very remote location, and they go through a lot of problems, a lot of challenges to retrieve this item, and they finally do. And they go back to Hogwarts, and they see, as they're returning from Hogsmeade, the village, the dark mark above the castle. In other words, it looks like the Death Eaters have arrived at Hogwarts and got in and committed murder. Actually, it's a ruse to get Dumbledore and Harry up to the castle. So they return to the castle and trying to find out what's going on. They land in this tower. They don't go straight in the castle first thing. And before long, they're in this pitched battle. The Death Eaters are rushing the roof, and Malfoy comes out on top, and he's able to get the advantage over Dumbledore. He's able to make sure that Dumbledore loses his wand, and there's Draco Malfoy ready to kill Dumbledore. But then a funny thing happens. He can't go through with it. Draco Malfoy can't go through with killing Dumbledore. And in fact, we soon learned that Dumbledore knew what Malfoy was up to all along, but he didn't do anything about it because he was protecting Malfoy. He knew that Lord Voldemort would kill Malfoy, and so he didn't act. He was protecting Malfoy. And so the Death Eaters arrive, and there's a pitched battle going on, and Dumbledore puts a freezing spell on Harry and paralyzes him because he doesn't want him doing anything. And Professor Snape arrives, and it's believed that he's coming up to help, but then he uses the killing curse and kills Dumbledore. That tragic scene that none of us really wanted to see. Well, Dumbledore dies, and some important things to keep in mind. about Dumbledore's death, that it was love, sacrificial love, that had rescued Harry to start with. That's the reason he was able to survive the original attack. And so it appears that's being repeated. But Draco Malfoy, you start to wonder, is he switching to the good side? Because there was a point when he was crying in the bathroom. And I've often read that when a child reaches a certain age and they stop crying, that they don't seem to have emotions anymore, that's a sign of big time trouble. So you wonder, is Malfoy about to change sides? You know, in a way you want to see the bad folks get their comeuppance, but it's even more satisfying to see someone come to the good side. But Dumbledore sacrificed himself, and Snape seems like he's just a horrible guy. Now, I've looked ahead far enough to know that Snape's going to turn out to be on the right side. He's going to turn out to be a good guy. As Harry might say, it's hard to work that out, how that happens. But the unbreakable curse undoubtedly played a role in it, and also there was a tacit understanding, it's implied, between Snape and Dumbledore. So Dumbledore dies, and there's this sacrificial love aspect. He sacrificed himself to protect Harry, because back in the cave he tells Harry that his blood is more valuable than Dumbledore's blood. So the Death Eaters are defeated, they run away, Snape runs away, and you know, the castle's left, everybody's extremely torn up over the death of Dumbledore, because that's not something we wanted to see. He was Harry's patron, protector, and friend for all this time, and now he's gone. And in the aftermath, there begins to be a discussion about whether the school is ever going to reopen again, because now Dumbledore has been murdered. And you think of all the happy times that Harry had at Hogwarts. He was this happy little boy, mistreated, and he got to Hogwarts, and then he was so happy. There was this scene where he went to the bookstore in Diagon Alley, and he saw his friends Ron and Hermione, and this big smile crosses his face. And then there were the good times on the Quidditch team, and then there was this scene where they were all singing the school song, and Harry was, enthusiastically joining in. He was just so happy, and Hogwarts had been such a huge part of his life. It had been his home for so long, and now Dumbledore's gone. And has there ever been that significant person in your life that plays such a huge role that once they're gone, it just changes everything? Everything changes. There's no reason to go back to where you were before. Well, that's what's happening with Harry. You know, McGonagall's been there all along. She's a good witch. She's been there from the beginning, but they never had quite the same relationship, that mentoring, friendship, loving relationship that existed between Harry and Dumbledore. And so now Harry realizes that it's time to leave this place that's been his home for so many years now. And that's kind of sad, considering all the good times and how much better his life had been at Hogwarts, and now things are changing, and now it's time to leave, and he knows it, and so that's kind of sad. But it turns out that Harry's not going to be leaving alone, apparently, because there is this discussion happening about whether Hogwarts is ever going to reopen again. And so the three friends are sitting around talking about this, and Hermione says, "I can't bear the idea that we might never come back. How can Hogwarts close?" "Maybe it won't," said Ron. "We're not in any more danger here than we are at home, are we? Everyone's the same now. I'd say Hogwarts is safer. There are more wizards inside to defend the place. What do you reckon, Harry?" And then Harry says, "I'm not coming back, even if it does reopen." Ron gaped at him, but Hermione said, "Sally, I knew you were going to say that, but where will you go?" "I'm going back to the Dursleys once more, because Dumbledore wanted me to," said Harry. "It'll be a short visit, and then I'll be gone for good." "But where will you go if you don't come back to school?" "I thought I might go back to Godric's Hollow," Harry muttered. He had had the idea in his head ever since the night of Dumbledore's death. "For me, it all started there, all of it. I've just got a feeling I need to go there, and I can visit my parents' graves. I'd like that." "And then what?" said Ron. "Then I've got to track down the rest of the Horcruxes, haven't I?" said Harry, his eyes up on Dumbledore's white tomb reflected in the water on the other side of the lake. "That's what he wanted me to do. That's why he told me all about them. If Dumbledore was right, and I'm sure he was, there are still 4 of them, the Horcruxes that is, out there. I've got to find them and destroy them, and I've got to go after the 7th bit of Voldemort's soul, the bit that's still in his body. I'm the one that's going to kill him, and if I meet Severus Snape along the way, so much the better for me, so much the worse for him." There was a long silence. The crowd had almost dispersed now. This was Dumbledore's funeral. The stragglers giving the monumental figure of Grawp, that's Hagrid's brother, the giant, a wide berth as he cuddled Hagrid, whose howls of grief were still echoing across the water. And at this point I'm wondering if we've seen the last of dear old Hagrid. "We'll be there," said Ron. Okay, now that is a pivotal sentence right there. Harry's leaving Hogwarts, and his friends are going with him. "We'll be there, Harry," said Ron. "What?" he says. "At your aunt and uncle's house," said Ron, "and then we'll go with you, wherever you're going." "No," said Harry quickly. He had not counted on this. He had meant them to understand that he was undertaking this most dangerous journey alone. "You said to us once before," said Hermione quietly, "that there was time to turn back if we wanted to. We've had time, haven't we?" "We're with you whatever happens," said Ron. "But mate, you're going to have to come around my mom and dad's house before we do anything else, even Godric's Hollow." And it turns out it's because of Bill, his brother's wedding to Fleur Delacour, who was a character who was one of the people who competed in the Triwizard Tournament. They are getting married, and Harry looked at him and he's amazed that something so ordinary as a wedding can still happen. But as we leave the story of the Half-Blood Prince, who turned out to be Professor Snape, by the way, things are changing. Harry is leaving Hogwarts, and it looks like that Hermione and Ron are going with him, and their days at Hogwarts are over, but they're still together as friends. One for all for one. And that's a beautiful picture, that Ron and Hermione are going to be with Harry no matter what, and they're going to help him see this thing through the end. So it ends with this beautiful picture of Dumbledore's sacrificial love, and then the undying friendship of Ron and Hermione, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to Harry. But now they're heading into a pitched battle very soon with Lord Voldemort, and soon will face the Dark Lord. So Harry's going to do the job. He's going to embark on this dangerous journey, but he isn't going alone because his steadfast friends are with him. Are there parallels in real life? There certainly are. Can this happen in real life? It certainly can. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But next, the final battle looms with Lord Voldemort, in which we hope we're going to see the ultimate triumph of good over evil. But the sacrificial love, the undying friendship, those are beautiful pictures, beautiful lessons from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And we'll see what happens with the three friends as they take on the most dark wizard in history in the Deathly Hallows. Thank you.